All right, by City Hall's clock, it is 3 p.m. So I will call the Monday, May 2nd, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting to order. And for the record, I can see that all appointed members are present via Zoom, as is staff member Betty Gum. And in person at City Hall, we have myself, planner Hanna Veal, as well as City Attorney Charles Wadhams. And with that, are there any changes to the agenda? I might note that all of the items that are under changes to agenda we could go ahead and place on the consent agenda to be moved to a date certain as noted on the agenda. And with that, we can move to the consent agenda, including those items.
I didn't see any changes to the minutes, and unless either of you guys did, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then the first item on the agenda to be heard is old business action item, design review fiscal year 2022, number 1. Jeff Hatch. Not seen online. Oh, here he's in person. Discussing a new construction at 6845 North Gardner Lane.
Good afternoon, Jeff Hatch with Hatch Design Architecture. Our address is 200 West 36th Street in the wonderful town of Garden City. I'm just going to transfer the presentation online real quick. So bear with me for one moment. From the feedback that we received at our last design review hearing, we went back and discussed with ownership as far as some of the comments and considerations that were brought forth, and decided that we were able to modify the use of this location as far as how it would function for the company, but still achieve a concept that works for the Glass Doctor. So as you can see from this concept rendering, we updated.
We're not seeing anything, Jeff.
Oh, how do I? Let's see. Well, I apologize. It looks great over here. How about that?
Yep.
Okay. So from our last meeting, we went ahead and adjusted the facade and the entry, tying that into the public sidewalk more appropriately and addressing folks. We're also able to squeeze in a couple parking spaces so that we have some adjacency to the entrance for the parking lot, as well as the pedestrian access. So I think we're familiar with the site. This is the landscape plan, how that was adjusted. So we do have that entry canopy and also the public sidewalk connection. So our previous concept with the entry on this side, now taking that and setting it up over here so we can have that more appropriate entry focused on Gardner Lane. So the previous elevations, how those have been revised. And our previous elevations didn't change too much on these facades, but there is a little bit more glazing on this side. And our concept rendering. So I will stand for any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hatch?
I do not have any.
All right, seeing none, does the staff wish to give a staff report or?
I can give a quick update.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. Staff was able to provide a new staff report for the most recent resubmittals, just generally because there have been quite a few resubmittals. So the staff report provided last week for the record is the most updated staff report. There are comments regarding the street trees. However, they have been conditioned to work with staff regarding the size, or at least the type and varietal of the street trees proposed there along North Gardner Lane. So it really is up to discussion between the committee and the applicant to discuss the glazing and fenestrations and any other requirements that the committee might mention in section or in accordance with Garden City Code 84C3. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal? All right, seeing none. Is there anybody online or in person that wishes to provide testimony on this matter? All right, seeing none. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Hatch?
I always like a nice banter with design review. It's not always my favorite thing to do while I'm going through the process, but I think the end of the process is always what's best for the city. So I appreciate your comments and your time.
Thank you. And then I'll open it up for the committee's discussion.
I think this is a really welcomed change to the design, and you know, I guess for all of the iterations that we went through, and now to actually have that more public component on the other side of the building, I think is a welcomed change, and really eliminates the concerns that I've had with this project. Yeah, no, I just think, you know, really well done.
I'll echo Brett. I welcome this change. I appreciate Jeff working so hard to try to address the comments, and this was kind of a difficult situation, having already been approved a while ago and now coming back through the process. And so I appreciate all the work that went into this. I have a question, and I'm sure this is not very welcome. Since you made the move, the entryway from one side of the elevation to the other, why not just turn it to the side? I'm just kind of curious why you didn't go ahead and just put the door actually on Gardner Lane, since you moved that over. And before you answer that, that's probably going to be my only question. I'm not sure. Well, yeah, I would like to hear the answer to that.
So the structural accent canopy that we have that covers the entry would not be able to impede in that front setback that we have along the street. And so really being able to maintain that architectural feature to the north, pulling the entry on that northern side, so it's very obvious that that is the entry, is kind of the main driving factors. If we put the public entrance on the east, we wouldn't be able to have it a covered structure, or at least the size of the building would have to physically shrink in order to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your answer.
And I echo, I think that this is, you know, it did take a while to get here, but I think we're here, and I think this looks good, and there's enough glazing, and it interacts with the street. So I think this is a this is definitely, as Brett said, kind of a welcome change. And I don't have anything further to say. I move that we approve it as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a code amendment to Garden City Title 8, 83C, 86B, and 87A2. And the applicant is Garden City, and City Attorney Charles Wadhams will provide both the application and staff report on this in conjunction.
Thank you, Ms. Thornborrow. I am here for code amendments, as you said, for the design review process and to talk about what we should do with the Searle Mitchell Overlay District. So there's 3 documents in your packet that I'm going to reference specifically. I'd like to go through my memorandum first and then look at a couple different options for what we can do. So looking at my memo, it is in your packet. I would like to just first draw everybody's attention to page 3 of my memorandum. There, since we share the screen. There, okay. So first thing I want to point out is what I have in bold up here. Oh, this doesn't seem to be working. There it goes, right here. Standards for review or approval, and I've been talking about this for years. But this just indicates the reviewing body needs guidance concerning how to determine compliance. If there are no standards for review and approval, an ordinance may be struck down for vagueness or decisions overturned as being arbitrary and capricious. We knew this was the law. This has been the law for years. I've been preaching this for years. And this is what happened just recently. So we are court mandated to fix portions of our code as a result of, we were concerned about this happening, and it did happen. So this is a judicial mandate, and that's why I'm here today. So if we could go to page 7 of my memo, please. Okay, so I'm going to take these sometimes in order and sometimes maybe a little out of order. But we have this judicial decision, and it said a couple things. It said that you have some vague subjective criteria in your factors for design review approval, and you have some vague criteria for Searle Mitchell. And so one thing we could do on Searle Mitchell to deal with the ambiguity is just to repeal it. And I do want to say on the record, what the city is looking at right here is if the city and the decision makers and the recommending bodies think that Searle Mitchell should be repealed, that doesn't mean that anybody's recommending that we're getting rid of the branding. There's current signage, there's current mapping, there's current marketing. And so repealing the ordinance, repealing the overlay district would not get rid of any of those things. We would keep the branding as the Searle Mitchell district. We could maybe call it a design standard instead of an overlay. So this design review committee is a recommending body. One of the things we're going to be asking you today is if you have a recommendation on repealing the overlay district and keeping the branding, or trying to repair the overlay district. So that's one of the kind of the large issues that I'm going to ask for recommendations for today. So if we're looking at page 7 of my memo, the first thing I have here is explanation of proposed amendments impacting all design review applications. So I'm going to start with the broader issue, and that's all design review applications, and then I'm going to go down to the narrower issue of the Searle Mitchell overlay district. Looking at the broader issue, and the overreaching theme in all of this is our code needs objective criteria, not subjective criteria. Where jurisdictions can get in trouble and where Judge Medema indicated we have some subjective criteria is in this area. And what does that mean? That means objective criteria means anybody can look at it and understand what, if they're going to pass or if they're not going to pass. Subjective is, maybe you need 10 parking spots, maybe you need 15 parking spots, kind of depends on how we feel on a particular day. We cannot do that. We need clear objective criteria. And so that's what staff and I have been trying to come up with here today. So when we look at these different things, what I did was I looked at several different jurisdictions and I thought maybe we could cherry pick some wording from other jurisdictions and not recreate the wheel, so to speak. Or maybe we do want to recreate the wheel. Garden City is not Eagle. Garden City is not Boise. Garden City is our own entity. We have a lot of infill. We have a lot of issues that are particular to our jurisdiction. So those are some of the quandaries that we've been looking at. For all design review applications, there's current required findings, and they're 1 through 7, and it's 8.6B 3D. And if we could just scroll down a little bit so we can see all of them. And so I'm going to start here, and I'm going to say, does this look like objective criteria to anybody that's looking? Some of those words, I know I'm not a planner. Some of those words, I have no idea what they mean, to be honest with you. So if I don't understand them, then I don't know how the general public can understand them. And so that's what we're here to try to fix starting today. We've already had a neighborhood meeting and a work session in front of the council. And so we're starting here with design review to get design reviews recommendations. Then we'll go to planning and zoning for their recommendations. And then ultimately it'll be up to city council to decide. But what everybody's looking at on their screen right now are the required findings as currently written. As you go and you look through examples from other municipalities, they have different wording. I provided in my memo, City of Meridian, City of Boise, City of Eagle, City of Caldwell. I think that's it for design standards. And the point is that each jurisdiction has different standards, which I could see how that could perhaps be confusing to developers. So when we're looking at these standards, some of the questions that I've had and I will continue to have until they're answered are, should there be any exceptions to these requirements? Should there be alternative compliance sections to these requirements? Meridian has an alternative compliance section. And I think Eagle has an exception section. So are these, do we want any waivers from these? Do we want any variances from these? And if so, why do we want that? But this is our starting point on this particular part of the code. The judge has pointed out some specific wording that he says is ambiguous and vague, and I will get to that in a minute. So as I went through the other jurisdictions, Meridian starts on page 9 of my memo. I generally understand what they're saying. They're talking about specific objective things on pedestrian walkways, on parking lots, on site design. Me as just a lawyer, not a planner, I can look at these words and understand what these words mean. If it's 2 acres or less, something happens. If it's greater than 2 acres, something else happens. That's what an objective criteria is. I would next like to talk about the specific issues that Judge Menema pointed out in our code, and that starts on page 15 of my memo. And again, these are specific to all design review applications. One of the criteria, if you recall, is that the standards have to adhere to the standards for the protection of health, safety, and general welfare. What the heck does that mean? I don't know what that means. Protection of health, safety, and general welfare. It seems to me like that is whatever somebody says it is on any particular day. So that is one of the issues that Judge Menema brought up. That's one of the issues that we're going to try to fix in this code amendment. Staff's recommendation on that one is that we just fall back on LUPA. And I think that's probably a pretty safe strategy. So on page 16 of my memo, I indicate this is what LUPA says health, safety, and general welfare means. And so our proposal on this code amendment, either on the repeal or the repair, because this is an amendment that applies to all design review applications, is you just look to what that means under LUPA. So under LUPA at 676502, the Idaho legislature has said this is what health, safety, and general welfare means. So you can go through here and just ask yourself, do these look objective to you? There's some wording in here. I mean, it's the Idaho legislature and nobody's attacked this wording, but I'm not sure what undue concentration means. I'm not sure what undue water and air pollution means. I'm not sure what encouraging something means. How do you encourage F to encourage urban and urban type development? That seems, I mean, it's what the state has. And so we're recommending that we use the state wording or improve upon it, but I'm not sure what encourage means, and I'm not sure what undo means. So on those issues, we look forward to recommendations on that. Another issue that we were looking at is Garden City Code on now page 17 of my memo, 8-7A-2. And this gets into, like I said, trying to update definitions, trying to make it clear what these definitions mean. But so we have a definition, and I'll get to it in a minute, exactly defining what health, safety, and welfare is, like I just mentioned, trying to define what mixed use means, trying to define what work, live, create property means, if that's what, if we're going to keep it, trying to define other terms like archaeological sites, Boise River, waterways, and wetlands. We pulled definitions from other accepted sources. These are not definitions that we came up with on our own. These are definitions that we looked at to other jurisdictions. And so these are just basically other jurisdictions' definitions that we've cut and pasted from. So I've provided on those general fixes for all design review applications. Those are the initial thoughts that I'll go over in more detail here in a minute. Of course, we could pick what we like from other jurisdictions and discard what we don't like from other jurisdictions. We could try to fix what we currently have, which is what we're recommending here today. But I mean, there's a lot of different options that we could try to apply to fix this problem. Towards the second half of the page, page 17, now I'm talking about what should we do about the Searle Mitchell work, live, create overlay zoning district. And like I said at the beginning, we could just repeal it and keep the branding, or we could try to fix it. Legal department has no preference or recommendation on that. I think the city could do either one of those things. I do see there's value added to the Searle Mitchell district. And so I'm not here to suggesting we should just get rid of all of it, but we do need to fix it, or we need to repair or repeal it, one of the two. So when we go through this and we have the discussion, first thing is what kind of dimensional requirements that should the city have? If the city's going to keep the Searle Mitchell overlay district, what dimensional requirements should we have? Currently, we just have dimensional requirements on setbacks and on the size of the development. That's it for dimensional requirements. Should we have more? Should we have less? Should we have different? That's not for me to decide. But as a city, that is a decision that does have to be made. On page 18 of my memo, on the very top, we talk about, and I know there's been a lot of discussion, and probably the committee is aware of whether or not there should be a 1-to-1 ratio in this overlay district, 1 residential to 1 commercial. There's been testimony, there's been evidence, there's been things on the record that that was the intent. But our code currently does not say that. So if that is the intent of the Searle Mitchell overlay district, staff needs to be told that, and we will put it in the code amendments. So that is 8.3C, 3D, and E. And then the rest of the memo is really talking about parking. And that is a big issue that the city has to decide. What do we do about parking? That's a big conversation. We're just starting to have that, and that's not a simple answer. And I know it's not a simple answer. And it's not a simple answer for anybody. Boise's going through their code amendments on parking. We have a lot of growth coming into the valley. It's a question that I'm not sure I have an answer for right now, but I know what the questions are. And one answer is the way our code is currently written is ambiguous, and it's been termed ambiguous. And so if we're going to keep it, we need to fix it. So these parking regulations that I'm talking about, starting on page 18, are specific to the Searle Mitchell overlay district. And currently it says 8.3C3. And I know when I'm done with my presentation, Ms. Thornborrow is going to talk more about parking because she lives and breathes it on a daily basis. But my general legal concepts here are it's vague as it's currently written. It does say 1 off-street parking for each living unit. I understand that's easy, but where it gets complicated is where it starts talking about working spaces over 500 square feet. And then it talks about a determination by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't even look at these. And so, so it just gets all muddled up, and we're trying to fix it. And we'd love the recommendations. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is if the Searle Mitchell overlay district is repealed, then in that area, we default to the general parking provisions. And that's 8.4D, and I start talking about that on page 20 of the memo. Because if we default to that, just so everybody's aware, that has more parking regulations than the overlay district currently does. So for an example, as it was explained to me, for one residential dwelling unit, in the general parking regulations, you would need anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 parking spots. But in the Searle Mitchell, you'd only need 1. So we're going back to, do you want to repeal Searle Mitchell where there's less parking regulation, or do you want to repeal that and go to the more regulation of the general requirements, or what? That's not for me to decide. I'm just pointing out the issue. So then the rest of my memo is kind of showing different examples of parking regulations from different jurisdictions. And I think as I went through these, and I'm looking if it's an objective standard, Eagles, I mean, I like Eagles. Eagles is just ratios. And I like ratios because I can understand ratios. And so I would make a recommendation that we use ratios of some kind on these things because they're easy to understand. So now I'm going to show you what ordinances could look like. And then we'll stand for questions. So if we could look at the repeal ordinance, it's called option A in your packet. Looks like that. And so this is the repeal of the Searle Mitchell overlay district. We can go to page 3 of that. We have a table here. And before I get to the specifics of the table, there's a bigger issue. Should the city get rid of all overlay districts? I mean, do we need overlay districts? You can see here, we have 4 set up. We have 4 of them set up here. We got that one, that a repeal, we take it out of the table altogether. And we have this one. And then there's 2 more that have never even been codified. So really, if we get rid of Searle Mitchell, we only have 1 overlay district right here. And when I was asking the planners about the Searle Mitchell overlay district, I said, how many times has that even been used? And it's only been used twice. And one the city got sued on. So we're expending a lot of work on something that's only been used twice so far. But the bigger topic is, do you want to get rid of all of them? I'm sure the council would love a recommendation on that. On to page 6 of the ordinance, towards the bottom right here. A decision needs to be made about the pre-act process. When I was going through design review in the different jurisdictions, it's interesting to me. In some jurisdictions, design review just goes to the development services director and it's an administrative decision only. Some jurisdictions, the development services director can go to the design review committee at her discretion. Other jurisdictions only do design review in certain areas, like a urban renewal area or a downtown area. In Garden City, we apply design review to everything, as far as I can tell. Most,
unless otherwise designated in code as a
Right.
staff level.
So do we really want that design review on everything? That's a big issue. And again, I don't have a recommendation on that. But what should we do about the pre-act process? This was something that the judge called out and said, what is Garden City's process here? As I understand it, currently there's 2 pre-app meetings, and Jenah could correct me, Ms. Thornborrow could correct me if I'm wrong, but one's mandatory, one's discretionary on the committee. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Wadhams. And what the city does is the pre-application as it relates to design review is a required codified process. However, the city does offer, and it is confusing that it's called the pre-application, for anybody that's wishing to do any sort of permitting process, a free consult with those that will review their application. And so it's typically those that are wishing to, say, build a new building, they would meet with the fire department, the structural reviewer, the public works department, planners, all at one time. And that is not a codified requirement whatsoever. It's just a service that the city does to help for those that are trying to navigate the process.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Thornborrow.
Thank
So again, what should that really look like in an ideal world? Trying to make everybody happy, trying to have nice development in the city. What does the pre-app process look like? That's something that the judiciary said we need to figure out. Page 7 of this ordinance. This is what we had for proposed fixes of, remember those required findings for all design review applications. There you go. So for those of us that may or may not know, the things we were trying to take out are crossed out. So we're crossing out what we think was the bad or not the great. And then we're adding, what we think might fix it. But I'm here to say that this is not ready. I'm not comfortable with this yet, because as you look at our fixes, I'm not sure what all of it means. And so maybe it's just because I'm a lawyer, not a planner, but it does cause me some pause. So if you go through some of this wording, we tried to fix it, but again, we went from like 7 criteria now to 11 criteria. And you can go through and see what the recommendations are, but I still have some concerns. And I'm hoping, what I'm really hoping is by the time this gets to the city council, we have great recommendations from the design review, we have great recommendations from planning and zoning, and then we can have a great finished product. I just don't think we're here quite yet. But this is where we are right now, and would love recommendations on this. And then if we add the definitions, like I talked about in the memo, the definitions, so we tried to make it real clear. And again, things that we added are underlined, things that we have taken out or stricken through. And so I think that probably pretty much summarizes option A, the repeal. If you go to option B, the amend ordinance or the repair ordinance, I'll just talk about that real quick. One of our fixes is on page 1 of the ordinance, right here. This is where the council said that the intent was a 1-to-1 ratio in this overlay district. And so we tried to pick wording that says it's a 1-to-1 ratio, but my question is that really what it says? And would love a recommendation on that. I'm not sure that really says 1-to-1 ratio. So maybe we can improve that wording. On page 2 of this ordinance, we tried to fix on the parking with the how many square foot, so on and so forth. We tried to say it's cumulative here. It's cumulative because it wasn't clear if it was cumulative or not. So we tried to clarify that. And then the rest of the changes are the same. Well, that's not right. The rest of the changes are the same, trying to fix design review. So on this option D that we're looking at right now, it's trying to repair Searle Mitchell overlay district, trying to repair the design standards applicable throughout the city. The other thing I want to mention, and I'll stand for questions, are, let me get my reference real quick. Okay, if we could go back to page 19 of my memo for a minute, I neglected something. The other issue, the last issue before I stand for questions, I want everybody to be thinking about shared parking agreements and whether we should even have shared parking agreements. So code currently talks about shared parking agreements right here. And then it says, and then it talks about if you're going to have a shared parking agreement, let me find it. There we go. And it says this is what should be in the agreement. It only specifically references what A and B. So I think we should probably have more in our agreements than just A and B. And so do we want shared parking agreements? And if so, what should be in the agreement? Again, I'm sure the city council would love recommendations on that as well. So I think that's my plan presentation. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
And before we turn it over to questions for Mr. Wadhams, he had mentioned that I did want to address the parking, which the standard 8.4 parking, 8.4, I don't know the exact reference off the top of my head, D the 8,4D parking is not a part of the potential changes, but as he noted, and as you have dealt with, particularly over this past year, that parking is quite an issue. I did want to talk about that, but just to summarize Mr. Wadham's proposal, there are two different options that he has proposed. One is to repeal the Searle Mitchell currently codified as work, live, create. And if it is, well, I'll get to that. And then still address the design review required findings. And there's been an attempt with those required findings to make them clear and concise, while also relating back to that which you review in 8.4. All of the standards within Title 8.4. And as Mr. Wadham's noted, perhaps there's still room on that. And then the second option would be to repair and get rid of any arbitrary language within the Searle Mitchell current code as well. And then one suggestion that has not made it to these draft ordinances, if the Searle Mitchell work, live, create designation is maintained and within code. Right now, the comprehensive plan, as well as the branding, is live, work, create. And perhaps that might be a change right now to just change those where they match the same live, work, create instead of live, work, create and work, live, create. And then with parking, I'll get into that now. It did come up and I had noted that I would work on a parking policy as noted in code. And very similar to what Mr. Wadhams had suggested, I looked at our code and said, perhaps we can take a table with all of the Garden City identified uses and add a ratio of parking that we've applied to other locations, other approvals such as Casino Beach or the Boardwalk. As I got into that, as well as currently we have methods on how to address mixed use or a reduction in parking. Those might be things like auto disincentives that we've talked about, such as meters or parking maximums, unbundling of parking of residential units, auto reduction incentives. So provide car shares at no surcharge to the user of the amenity, design incentives such as design storage not within the garage, parking agreements. But it is true that in looking at the parking agreements as spelled out by code, there is room for improvement for sure. The city isn't currently set up, but perhaps it's paying into a public system. Transit incentives could be an option, such as a transit pass per employee or resident. Bicycle incentives, multifamily, covered biking in conjunction with garages, tenants who participate in some sort of a program or employees. And so there are a number of ways to reduce or match parking. But as this committee's heard quite a bit too, there's also a current theory of just getting rid of parking altogether and allowing the market to take care of that. So that would be another option to look at. So if that is done, there might be other I guess things that the city would need to look at. Would that be metered parking? Would there be residential permits that would need to be granted? Because there will be those that have lived in areas for long times or have businesses that have been in areas that may feel that redevelopment is affecting their traditional ability to park on the street. And one of the things that was identified by planning staff, if the city is to move to a very strict parking requirement that has strict ratios, that may be difficult for the businesses to move in and out. So if you have any change of use, how is that parking reviewed then? Or would those new uses be required to find additional parking, or would they then have access parking that they wouldn't be required to have per code? We've talked to CCDC, the Urban Renewal District in the city of Boise. And CCDC does oversee a number of the parking structures within the city of Boise. And if that's a direction that you would like to recommend to the city council, that would be a difficult recommendation just because of the funding that would be required. But we do have information on that if you would like. And then there's a number of different efforts that are going on within the city. For example, the police department is working with Ada County Highway District to try to address some of the areas that have been specifically pinpointed as having problematic parking areas. And so 42nd Street is one of those. And so they're trying to work with ACHD to see if there's a way, if there's a mechanism within the existing right-of-way that could be addressed, perhaps one-way streets with angled parking on one side instead of parking on both sides. And if on-street parking is maintained, and that's part of this issue, I would suggest that discussions with the fire department and ACHD, as well as the police department, suggestions would come through them prior to coming to this committee. And then the Galena Fund group that's doing a lot of work in the 40s and the numbered streets redevelopment work is working with Urban Land Institute right now. They have a panel advisory service through ULI looking at what a master plan for that area might be. And so they have already started that process, and ULI will be here in the next month or so interviewing stakeholders. But they are specifically, one of their biggest questions is what to do with parking and how to make parking a more public system versus on a case-by-case property basis. In listening in on their San Diego, their initial panel a few weeks ago, that panel does include a number of people that may be larger city size than Garden City. There was the mayor of Pittsburgh, for example. There's somebody that had done quite a bit of redevelopment work in San Diego. And that panel did tend towards just getting rid of the parking regulations in their entirety. What we have asked, what Garden City has asked as they go through the process, if they can identify codes for urbanizing areas that are small communities still, so maybe not having the funding that a larger community might have, that may not have a robust transit system. And so those are all the moving parts that I think I can see right off the top, and maybe directions that we can talk about parking. Just note that this particular code amendment that Mr. Wadhams has brought to the committee for recommendation does not include changes right now, but he is looking for recommendations in direction. And then also Mr. Wadhams can clarify upon rebuttal, but it sounds to me like he's maybe hoping for a continuance on this to give more time to review the code.
Yeah, Mr. Thornborrow, I would rather measure twice and cut once on this one. So if we need to continue things a few times to get everything pinned down, that would be my preference, because we are talking about complicated issues affecting property rights. So yeah, I'd rather measure twice and cut once on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. And then with that, this is a public hearing, and you kind of had a staff report and an applicant presentation all rolled into one. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to testify? If so, please utilize the raise your hand feature. All right, seeing none. Is there anybody in person? Oh, there are two, excuse me. I didn't see it quick enough. Greg Hahn.
Sorry, I'm getting my video started here so you can see me. And I don't want to say much. I wrote a letter to, I'm Greg Hahn. I am the executive director of Searles Place. Obviously, this is something we're very interested in following along. I'm really kind of heartened to hear the conversation, or even just the laying it out today, which I think makes a lot of sense. Our board approved me to send a letter to the city council just to say how much we sort of think the district adds a lot of value to the area and is something that should be preserved. I do know that the question of whether we keep the district or just keep the branding is fine, and I think that's good in a lot of ways. But of course, a brand without substance isn't probably a really long-lived plan. So I think we certainly want to really encourage finding ways to make it work. I'll just quickly say it clearly needs to be revisited and explored. I mean, like Mr. Wadham says, that the lack of use, lack of clarity, plus it's a very different neighborhood than it was a few years back when the district was created. I think you all maybe know that there was some question in the city council meeting that Searle was on the planning and zoning herself when they created the district, sort of to encourage the kind of development that she had done. If you've been to Searle's Place, it's a house and a studio, right? So you could do that as an artist, you could do that as an entrepreneur, you could do that in a lot of different creative approaches. Now it's obviously the things are more dense. There's a lot more, the land values are going up, and as the buildings get higher, the values go higher. So that's just going to keep on going. So I do think it's definitely time. It's a great chance to take a look at it. And Mr. Watt, I have another, Mr. Adams pointed out the parking rules. Those rules work really great, I think, for more suburban neighborhoods like those on the other side of the fairgrounds and along the river out there. They obviously don't work in a place that's, a pretty dense area right tucked into downtown Boise. It's funny that you mentioned the bigger cities. I mean, in some ways, this is a tricky one for Garden City. This neighborhood can't kind of act like it's in a 12,000 person town, right? It's right in the center of an 800,000 person metro area. And so it's a very different place. But yeah, I just think this is a wonderful chance. Mr. Adams, I'm really happy to hear you say that maybe it shouldn't be sped through. I think it's a great opportunity for the city and for the residents of this part of the city, and then the business owners, because I don't live in the city. I live in Boise, but work out, at the Searles Place. But it's just a really cool chance to take a step back and see what it should be and how to keep it, the kind of the intentions behind it, the idea that it can be an affordable and interesting and safe and walkable and bikeable and creative area. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you for giving me a few minutes of time.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hahn? All right, thank you, seeing none. We'll go to Jason Jones.
Hey everybody, Jason Jones here. Well, since it was our lawsuit that is kind of the action that instigated all of this, I think there's a whole bunch here. I mean, I'd like to see maybe more interaction between people who actually live in this neighborhood before the code is just rewritten or repealed. I feel like maybe there's a chance that we could have some actual work sessions where everybody could be invited to kind of go through, because I think the problem is we don't even know what really should be changed. I mean, I know as part of our lawsuit, some of the stuff that came up was like the 1-to-1 ratio, and again, I think it's going to come down to whether the city believes they should have a 1-to-1 ratio. I think the truth of the matter is that the code as it is doesn't have that ratio. It never had the ratio. The city council tried to enforce that ratio, but there's new city council people who are now been voted in, and maybe they don't agree that it should be 1-to-1. I think if we add a 1-to-1 ratio to this code, it basically becomes unusable. And so even if you kept the code, you like, I think of some of the projects that have come in the last year. There's a great one here on 33rd Street that has like 4 little residential units with a workspace, a 2-story workspace on the front of it that I think could have been submitted as a live work project. It didn't because of all the confusion of what was happening there. But to me, it shouldn't necessarily be 1-to-1 because some workspace uses might actually have more than 2 artists in them. I think Derek on this committee has a space that's a workspace with bunches of artists. And so if he had a bunch of residential units for his workspace, I think it would be fine. I mean, I don't think they have to come in a 1-to-1 ratio to fit what the actual purpose of the district is. I think the market kind of determines how people design and build those things. So I think it's kind of dangerous to do that because then this is going to get used even less than it has been used. And as Charlie pointed out, this code hasn't been used very often. And part of that is that the regular code is less restrictive than the live work code. And so I think it should be part of the goal of what we're doing here should be to make the live work code more usable. While we're fixing it, if we make it where it actually can be used, I think we can encourage an actual live work neighborhood going forward. And I think that's the real goal. I think I want to comment to the parking stuff. I mean, I think as part of the lawsuit that we don't actually have the findings of that lawsuit and as part of the documents, but I think it would be useful for people to understand what was really occurring. The truth is the live work parking is probably the most clear parking in the city's code. If the live work is removed and repealed, the other parking for the city code is also going to have to be fixed. It basically has the same problem that the live work code has. So if you kind of see how the live work code is proposed to be changed, I think you're going to see that subjectiveness for all the commercial parking exists. Right now, there is no commercial parking. And I think what the judge basically says, hey, you can't not have parking regulations. And you can't just figure it out later based on something. And that's how the current code, not just the live work, but just all the code is currently written. And so I think, to me, the live work actually does have the parking for workspaces actually objectively laid out with one little exception to where it says, hey, or the planning commission could decide. And that can be removed. And then the live work code's actually better than the regular code. So again, I don't think, that didn't actually apply to the lawsuit. I think they just realized that basically the lawsuit said, hey, you have to lay it out. And I think, in my mind, the live work code, the parking already is there and it works. But, again, I think the bigger picture is, hey, can we fix this live work to make it more used? Because right now it isn't being used. And that's because there's some other things within the live work, I think, that make it more restrictive that right now we could kind of clean up and fix so that, I think at some point there was a code revision after the live work that made the regular mixed use code less restrictive. And so it's become way easier for people to just do a PUD and get a bunch of variances. And that's why we're seeing so many of that type of application, because a lot of the code all the way across the board is broken and not usable. And so if you start to look at how many applications come through as PUDs that really shouldn't be PUDs, they could just be a regular submittal. I think what the reason for that is that there's a lot of broken code, and it's not just the live work code, it's all of it. And so, in my mind, like I said, just pretending to fix the live work code doesn't really fix the actual issue maybe that's happening here. Because like I said, the real reality is that had the city council just followed the recommendation of this body, the design review committee, which you guys on that application read the code, you said, hey, this is what the code says, and you approved those applications 3 times. If the city council hadn't been like, well, this is not what it says, but this is what it meant, and interpreted stuff that wasn't written there, then we wouldn't be here today. So again, some of it really wasn't about the stuff that's written in the code. It was really more about the city council wanting stuff to be written in the code that wasn't there, and then denying an application for that reason.
Right. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Jones? Great, thank you. Then we'll turn it over to Hanna Ball.
Thank you, Hanna Ball, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City. And let me pull up my notes. Basically, just to follow on to everything that's been said so far. Ultimately, the Live Work Code has highly inspired me to think about creating smaller, flexible, affordable spaces in this unique part of town. I just wanted to add that this section of town has always been commercial in nature. So it's tough to blend in some of the uses for the commercial component and create new developments that are cohesive in the area. So when I read this section of code, I think it has a lot of merit, and it already really has a tone in the right direction. Also, I just wanted to remind the design review committee, and I'm sure everybody knows, but the lots in the original town site are so small, they're only 50 by 150. And there's a lot of fragmented ownership. So assemblage has always been very, very difficult in this area. And by over parking this part of town, I think we will lose the artist vibe, and we'll lose a lot of that branding and a lot of those philosophies if we're forced to over park this section of town. Also, to Charlie's point, if the Live Work Code goes away, we are defaulted to the base zone on commercial parking count. And that's the largest deficiency I see, is that we don't have a clear parking count. So maybe this is the time to analyze what that parking count could be. Maybe it's a 1 parking space per 2,000 square foot. I know that we looked at adding a 1 per square footage ratio, like Charlie had mentioned previously in different applications, has been somewhat successful. The specific area plan had a 1 to 1,500. So I just think it's really that commercial parking code that really needs to be analyzed. And I don't know if it's during this zone. I like the idea of having a neighborhood working group, and then also just having some more time to process what these changes actually mean, and then apply them through design for a quality community. So those were my notes, and I appreciate everybody's time and energy in looking at this, especially since it's our living and working district. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Ball? All right, Mr. Wadhams, is there anything else that you would like to say as the applicant?
Thank you, Ms. Thornborrow. No, I am hearing everybody's messaging loud and clear. Oh yeah, I had 2 mics going on, excuse me. 1 mic, back to 1 mic. I hear everything loud and clear, and I don't disagree with any of it. I'm here to raise the legal issues, but I'm not here to make the policy. So I'm here to serve, and we'll take whatever recommendations, or if the committee would like to continue this to a date certain and have us make some changes, that would be perfectly fine. But I'm here to serve. So whatever is the will of the committee is what I will try to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wadhams? All right, I'm not seeing any. And so before I turn it over for discussion and direction, I do want to note that the city is currently in-house working on code revisions, but the idea is to address Title VIII in its entirety over a course of time. And one of the things that the Development Services Department has on the list of items to address, in addition to parking that's on there, there are a couple of things that were brought up. The planned unit development discussion is certainly one of those, where perhaps there are some reasons that this committee or the plan unit development is being utilized that could easily be addressed. Another thing on that list that is suggested that the city review is it time to make design districts that match the comprehensive plan. And so in many ways, I think those that are looking at the Searle Mitchell, I'm going to call it Live Work Create District, there's a desire that is in a design district, what I'm hearing in its entirety for that area versus something that's looking at how do you address or what the city has interpreted as a 1-to-1 ratio of living and working. And if that's the case, I think that there's direction from this committee that might be warranted. What's the difference between that district and mixed use? Should the city be looking at design districts that address the comprehensive plans, identified desires for the communities or the neighborhoods? I think that's all that I have before turning it over. Thank you. Anybody want to start?
I'll make a few comments. On the parking, that's something that's come up quite a bit in our review of applications, and for certain areas of the city. And I would look to the comprehensive plan to kind of look at for those areas, the activity centers. I don't know that we need, I think we need maximum parking rather than minimum parking. And, but I think in exchange for some of the parking, we do need to disincentivize auto-oriented travel. So all of those things that you were talking about, I brought up several of them in the past. I hope that we continue to look at that and really look at how certain areas of the city where that could be applied, which kind of goes to the point that you were just saying, as far as really looking at, our base zoning districts don't really reflect a lot of what the comprehensive plan is, the vision that's outlined in the comprehensive plan. So, not a fan of, hey, let's create even more, but maybe take a look at the mixed use, take a look at some of these overlay. Do we need the overlays? Maybe we just need more options related to the desired land uses in those areas as reflected or outlined in the comprehensive plan. And I think that also ties into taking a look at the PUD, because we're getting application after application, and from sometimes the way I look at it, they're just asking for a PUD because they don't want to meet the requirements, rather than what the intent of the PUD is, which is to create something unique that the existing requirements don't allow you to create this unique situation, unique development, preserve open area, or, just do something different. And instead they just, I don't really feel like meeting the setbacks. Let me go for a PUD. I'm not saying that's what people are doing. It's just, from my perspective, it seems like that is what we're being asked to approve. And I'm like, no, we can't. I don't think our rules allow us to do that. So I would rather push in that direction, looking at that rather than, hey, let's just repeal the Searle Mitchell. I think we can modify it and make it a little bit more usable and applicable and reflective of what the comprehensive plan calls for in this area.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think as a big picture too, I'm a fan of fixing rather than repealing, and I'd like to see that happen. And not only I would say, don't just fix it to make it legal and objective, but fix it to create the intent. Look at what the intent is, fix it, the things that are wrong with it, but then look at what are the incentives of using it, right? Because maybe part of fixing it is making it so that people are going to use it because they're incentivized to use it, right? Like there's some small parking concessions and there's some small setback concessions, and it's been used twice since it was invented, right? So can we have more parking concessions and more setback incentives and other incentives perhaps that it's going to be used 20 times since inception instead of 2 times since inception? So that would be my goal in all of this. And you know, I'm glad the city and Charlie's open to kind of a, you know, this is kind of a introduction to it. We'll continue it, we'll discuss it, we'll continue it, we'll discuss it, and we'll get it to a place that is, you know, ultimately a usable overlay and something that developers are going to look at seriously and consider. And I think, you know, personally, and how I read this, it's looking to create more small spaces for artists and small spaces for living. And I think that's one of, in my mind and how I read it, you know, it's looking to incentivize that. So I think at the end of the day, we want to fix it and make it more of an incentive so it's actually used. That's kind of my initial broad brush stroke on it. And I have some more things we can talk about in more detail now or later, but I'd like to hear from Brett too.
Yeah, I guess I'd be in the same line with as far as repair rather than repeal. I think I also see some benefits into having some work sessions where, you know, we get some local involvement and really kind of talk through some of the issues and identify, as you were saying, the incentives to utilizing this. You know, if it's in an overlay district that's only been used twice, I think therein lies kind of reasoning to take a look at it and see, okay, well, why is that? And if it's going to remain and we're going to repair it, how can we make it? How can we make some changes that really encourage its use? And as far as the parking goes, I think that there is, outside of the Searle Mitchell, just the regular parking, I think that's been kind of an issue that seems to rear its head all the time as, you know, variances to parking counts and a code that really doesn't have a lot of things defined, and nor does it address some of the things that we always kind of see an argument for, you know, covered or garaged parking versus, you know, driveway guest parking. I mean, it seems to me that there could be a lot done there to set kind of a more solid foundation for how parking is reviewed, and take the subjectivity out of it, and, you know, then offer incentives for doing other things to offset the amount of parking. And maybe that's a way to address reduction in parking trade-offs of sorts. But I think there's a lot in there, and I think some work sessions would be helpful, even if it's just with us and the city staff, and kind of going through and looking at that a little harder.
Yeah. And I think there's people that have bought property in the district in the last 6 months, 8 months that, you know, would be great to have at the table too, because in their, you know, they're thinking about the future. They're going to develop something on, you know, how many ever parcels. And if they're at the table and able to say, this would help me, this would incentivize me to make, you know, 25 little, you know, 500 square foot houses along with 20 little workspaces, you know, I mean, if there's people at the table that are about to go through this process, it might be helpful to have them have a voice, and people that have done it and are in the middle of doing it. I think there's a lot of people that would benefit being at the table.
One thing that I've thought about this code is that it is trying to perhaps identify something that's different than mixed use, and that's different than just a commercial or a residential, perhaps, as and so I've wondered if there's not room within code for two things. One, to address when you have somebody that lives and works within their same lot, and how you address that through design, regardless of the district that it's within. And then also a design district that becomes much more mandatory instead of an incentivized. This is the direction that the community has decided that this area should look like, instead of being able to pick and choose whether they utilize the base zoning district or not for design. I'm not, I haven't thought about that in use. It's strictly design. So the use of your base zoning would still apply. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I agree with that first comment. I'm not sure. I mean, you know, home offices are already allowed. So why is it so difficult to allow a live work? I've just never understood why. I feel like we've actually made it more difficult to do that rather than easier. And you know, plenty of people already do live and work, and it doesn't have to be a studio necessarily. I mean, I think we need to think a little bit broader, which is why I also like your second point about, you know, if there's an area of the city that really wants that direction of the, where it's mandatory, you know, it will be live work. You will have these studios, we will have smaller homes and that kind of thing. Then that becomes an area, not just a zoning district that you apply to this one little piece of property in the middle of other pieces of property that are trying to do something different.
So I think without additional discussion, please feel free to stop me if you want additional discussion. But I think I am hearing perhaps the committee's recommendation at this point in time is to slow down, not just with the committee, but identify perhaps a work group to work through some of these code changes at this point in time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there any specific timeline that the judicial order or whatever it's called says you must change your code by such and such a date, or is this something, you know, is there any action we need in the interim while we're working on this?
I appreciate that comment. It was noticed up fast and furiously because of the mandate. The mandate doesn't have a time frame. However, it would be advisable to fix what the judge has identified as where the code is specifically has some errors. And so perhaps there might be a way to address the design review findings, for example, separate and a little bit quicker, because that's not redesigning an entire code. That's making sure that the findings make sense to that which you're looking at. And if that is the direction, Mr. Wadhams has left, but I suspect it'd be a good idea to put a Band-Aid on the Searle Mitchell Live Work Create parking issue that was identified, with the recommendation to continue to look at it and address the plan unit development, the design standards, the parking standards, everything that we've talked about with a work group. And that's just a liability thing, should somebody else come back through. Again, he's not here to weigh in on that, but I suspect that that might be a good direction.
Were you suggesting that the Band-Aid be on the Live Work Create district and then the other ones are work group and the Live Work Create district doesn't have a work group?
The Band-Aid would be to make a definable parking standard within the Live Work Create district for the time being, with the recommendation that that's not the fix that's actually recommended. Perhaps. And then certainly the design review findings, as we're constantly dealing with those. I think that those probably should have a fairly quick turnaround on them.
Do you need a motion for
Well,
that?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Brett, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can we make a motion then to continue this to a date certain?
Yes, please. And it looks like the next meeting, and we may just continue it if we don't have enough ready for you in 2 weeks. But May 16th is the next meeting.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to continue to a date certain of May 16th.
And I'll be out the 16th, just as a reminder.
Oh, hold on, I might be out the 16th as well.
Well, then we might not be having a meeting on the
May
16th.
not have that. What is the next meeting then? June 6th. Then June 6th would be the next meeting to continue.
Okay, then I'll modify my motion to a date certain of June 6th.
Oh, and I'll second that, and I'll just add as a discussion that at that meeting, we would hopefully see the short-term fixes to the design review findings, parking for the live work, and recommendations on how to create a work group and specific objectives for that working group to look at the Sorrel District live work create overlay. Does that make sense, Brett?
Yep, I accept those modifications to my motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda is a pre-application discussion for design review fiscal year 2022, number 12. Joshua Hersel is requesting a remodel of an existing building at 2288 North Garden Street. And as this is a pre-application, it's a little less formal, but if you'd like to provide a report, feel free, or a presentation.
Understood. Thank you. I am Brian Hallowell with Cushing Terrell Architects, 800 West Main Street, Boise, Idaho is our address. And do you by chance have the submittal documents available, or is it something I can pull up?
Yeah.
Might want to reference those for context.
Share this screen.
Okay. Okay, so the plan that we have in front of you is for a remodel of an existing restaurant located in Garden City, and it is directly adjacent to the Riverside Hotel. And the property has been purchased by a new owner, and the new owner would wish to basically bring the restaurant back to the original integrity of the design of the building. And in doing so, also has plans to remodel the building by improving interior decor, interior mechanical HVAC and plumbing fixtures, bring them better to functionality, because the building was built in the late 70s and has been a little bit distressed over its time. And then in addition to that, the general idea that we have taken, or approach that we've taken towards the exterior of the building, is to strip away some of the branding that we have felt it kind of diminishes the original design of the building, and are looking at reworking the exterior accoutrements or decor items of the building, the entryway, the materials, the parking, the pathways, bringing those all up to more of a desirable aesthetic and organization. So in this first image here on slide number 5, you can see that, we have X's over all these items that I'm loosely referencing, but essentially we're looking at primarily accomplishing hiding or obscuring or screening the mechanical unit on the roof. That is one of our primary goals. Our secondary goal is to eliminate or reduce the amount of I kind of referenced them as tattoos on the building, but essentially the decals that have been painted on the concrete. And then also reworking the entryway to be a type of roof line that is more commensurate with the original design of the building. And so that's some of our general approach there. In addition, there's been a pretty wholehearted effort into improving the landscape design. We find that there is a great opportunity to connect with and activate the establishment by connecting to the river and the greenbelt. And so the landscape architect and civil engineering firm has looked at creating a pathway that connects really nicely with the greenbelt, and including additional bike parking right at that intersection of the connection. There's also there are also plans to, and I might want to preface this with a conversation we can have a little bit later about connecting to the hotel, the Riverside Hotel, further along, wondering how we can accomplish getting a pathway connection, which is currently in planning and design right now, with a bridge covering the irrigation pathway, irrigation route of that slough. I'm going to go to the next slide down. So in trying to understand the spirit of the original building, we were looking at it and understood its time. The way we see it is it's a late era Frank Lloyd Wright prairie style. So it has the really bold form of a roof with it was originally asphalt roof, but it was covered with a exposed fastener tin or metal roofing. And that's what is there currently. But the idea is that the building, we understand it to be representing a boat or a canoe resting on the edge of the river, was the original chart house. And referencing that along with what we consider to be a good way to evolve or bring the design further along with something a little more comprehensive, we were looking at boat building techniques, and we're looking at the lofting of boat building to reference how we would do a screen wall. And so this slide here, you can see slide number 8 is a conceptual rendering sketch of how we would do a screen wall around the mechanical equipment that exists currently. And this is before we got too far into design. We realized that in design, we had the opportunity to bring some of the mechanical down, not all of it, but some of it. The main air handling unit, which you can see, is basically one of the tallest elements on the building, one of the most unsightly elements, quite frankly. We were able to bring that down to the lower structure and hide it with the screen wall. And the way we look at the screen wall is we express some ribs with extensions and have a shiplap type of wood siding and cladding on it. at an angle that would reference what you see in that image above, which would be like a shipbuilding, shiplap, and a cladding system. So that is the premise to the design ideas that we had. And then you can see here in this rendering, we have incorporated that screen wall element over to the left of the image, understanding that the function of that space is still maintained as a receiving and outdoor service yard for the restaurant. But what we are doing is we are moving the trash across the street to a trash enclosure that is also part of the plan. But that's the general aesthetic for this element. Where my cursor is. And then over this would be probably a better view to look at. And then this pathway over here is an early conceptual model of a pathway connection that does not exist, connecting the entrance to this restaurant and the future anticipated or proposed bridge over to the hotel site, which is a very active, considered an activity center for this portion of the Garden City. But getting a connectivity to all these establishments that reach over and connect with the Greenbelt. The roof here, what we're considering is it's a distressed corrugated metal roof. It's not a standing seam, it's actually corrugated with exposed fasteners. We're anticipating patching, repairing, and painting it with a patinaed copper look with a high performance metal coating. And this element here at the entry is a hip roof with a standing seam metal roof with an accent color. So it stands apart a little bit, reads like an entry, and is inviting to the public. But at the same time, we've produced a form with it that we feel is a little more commensurate with the design of the original building. We did see the staff report, and there were some comments about windows, glazing, and flat facades, or facades that are inarticulated. We feel that the screen wall that we are proposing here around the mechanical and service yard elements has a bit of intrinsic articulation with the exposed structure and ribs. Those would be comprised of steel frames, basically steel piers or posts or columns, that the wood framing would be behind, or would not be in the same plane, would be pushed back a little bit so you can see the ribs reading from the street. And then as part of our design evolution, since this has been submitted, we are including some vine walls that are on this little portion of the concrete, this existing portion here. And along the Greenbelt, we are looking at doing a demountable shade structure that would basically create an activated, well incorporated shade element along the whole existing patio along the Greenbelt there. Currently, there are picnic tables with umbrellas, so we would be making something a little more cohesive or integrated feeling. And then just wanted to reiterate that the design of the building, hold on. So that the design of the building, the only addition to square footage we have is this additional square footage for an enhanced entry vestibule. This is the outline of the existing vestibule, and then we're increasing the square footage of that to allow for more queuing space and for visitors when they're waiting to be seated. That vestibule will be glazed fully around the perimeter of it with a double door exiting onto an outdoor plaza. The plaza has benches that are surrounding this this feature, landscape feature right here. And then the plaza, we consider also extending over into this area where there's more like landscape elements. Don't have that expressed in this view right here. But the establishment will maintain its same use as a restaurant, and a majority of the other elements involving the restaurant are again just interior decor remodeling and HVAC renovations. See if I can find it. This is the rooftop mechanical systems that you see up there. We will be taking the so we'll be taking this air handling unit, this rooftop air handling makeup air unit, and moving that down on top of this roof here. And so that will be brought down. And then these back here will be, we'll have a shot on them that we're hoping to have those be painted so it can be something that matches the building a little bit better, in lieu of looking like something that's a piece of mechanical equipment on top of the building. And this structure will be removed. It doesn't necessarily serve a function that benefits the establishment. And we'll go over here. And for clarity, this is the location of the trash enclosure. So the future operator is understanding of a method for doing temporary bins and getting along the sidewalk and the pathway solid waste located over and positioned within the trash enclosure across the way. And that's been designed by a civil engineering and landscaping firm, taking into deep consideration solid waste vehicle circulation. And that's why we have it in our location. So it makes more sense for the site for it to be addressed from a front loading solid waste truck, being able to back up slightly and then forward out of the parking lot to mitigate safety concerns. Is there anything else to do? So I think that's all I have to present.
Thank you. I can't see the committee members with the screen share, but if you'd like to start the discussion, feel free.
Yeah, I just have a question on that, the trash enclosure and why it's so remote over there across the other side of the street. Was there no other opportunities?
Yes, there are a few reasons that I can elaborate on. Well, I can't really elaborate on, I can speak to the landscape architect and civil engineer representative can elaborate on it. We have concerns about the trash being picked up and serviced from the front entrance. There are a couple of reasons. One, we see that this connection here has the opportunity of being a great connection to the riverside and to the main entrance of the restaurant. And since this is not showing the future bridge that's being considered or proposed, but we see that as being a great activated connection spur, and also having a solid waste truck coming in and picking up solid waste from the front of the restaurant with a screen element that we're having to put in place to mitigate all those other concerns. It just functionality wise just seemed like things were starting to stack up on top of each other that kind of prohibited the functionality of getting a solid waste access to that. And so in exploring options, we decided that it was in the best interest of the establishment to have the solid waste in a screened enclosure remote. Also due to smells, smells is a major concern. For reasons I can't really speak to, the original building was built with the trash right within close walking distance to the entry. And if you ever walk up to the establishment, you'll notice that you're next to where the trash is. So we were really concerned about that. And so it led us to move it over there. And the best way that we found that would work or function would be to have a dedicated crosswalk and pathway. And then the establishment could plan to operate in such a fashion to where they would be depositing solid waste remotely.
Brett, can I add on to that question?
Yeah, yes.
I have some serious concerns about locating it across the street. Typically in a restaurant, you empty the trash throughout the day, but the big loads come out at night in the dark. And I just think that poses some safety concerns crossing Garden Street, at midnight. I think I see this huge parking lot, and I'm just, I suggest that you try to find another location where they don't have to cross the street to dump the trash.
I would concur with that. It just seems problematic for a use that does produce quite a bit of waste.
I do like the crosswalk and want to see that. I
Yeah,
just don't want
getting
to see
over
the
to the
trash on
parking.
that side. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, great, the trash is as far away as possible. I understand the safety concerns, but like I was thinking, why can't every dumpster be like 100 yards away? Because it's a pain for the operator, but it's great for the public, right? It's not, the trash isn't a part of your dining experience. So I hear the safety concerns, but I don't agree that it needs to come closer to the restaurant. But then in this short conversation we've had about it, is there a place that it can go across the bridge and be, in an enclosure on the Riverside side, and then there's not a safety concern, just to put that out there. But I'm not as concerned as my fellow committee members about the distance, because I think it's on the operator.
Yeah, I don't think, I guess the distance is not as big a concern to me as crossing that street.
Yeah, true enough.
With a bunch of totes. I mean, it can be in that other parking lot way at the end of the parking lot or something like that, if the desire was to have it push it far away. But I guess question on the existing parking. I know we're doing a bunch of improvement in this one area, but that existing portion of the parking over to the I guess it would be the east. I guess what's the deal with that? Is it that it's felt that it meets all the criteria and compliance with relative to landscaping and shade trees and all the rest of that nothing needs to happen over there?
My name is Sean Connor, Land Group, 462 East Shore Drive, Idaho. Landscape architect and civil engineering consultant on this one. So the parking lot on the east end of the parcel is actually being retained by the client for a future project. They're looking at doing some improvements over there in the future. And as such, they're trying to impact that as little as they can right now, not knowing what the final objective of that future design is going to be. So it does not meet your current parking standards, and we will identify that. But knowing that they do have plans to do something with it, it's just not sure what's going to occur at this time.
Okay, so it's a separate parcel. Is that correct?
It is not currently, no.
Oh, it's not a separate parcel.
No, so there is, well, you can see the parcel line that actually separates it halfway in between. We are making improvements on both sides of that parcel. So there are two parcels there, but we are bridging that line currently with improvements with this parking lot.
Okay, gotcha.
I think that goes to maybe my biggest comment. It's transportation related. The first is, it's my understanding that VRT Valley Regional Transit is intending on having a bus stop right around the area where that entrance is onto Main Street. Are you aware of that?
We are not aware of their new transit stop now.
And I think that their current potential design may require that become only a right in, right out if that access remains. So that might be something to get in contact with Valley Regional Transit. But maybe my bigger comment is we've had discussions even with the hotel about how congested the green belt is right there. And I think that the hotel itself creates a very large landmass to try to get those that might want a low stress commuter route around the hotel where they're not in conflict with those that are recreating, especially, peak hours in the summer months. And so I think that one potential option could be to utilize Garden Street, but you'd have to get that green belt traffic safely to Garden Street. And then there is a pinch point again with the hotel. Garden Street dumps onto Chinden, but that's something staff hasn't come up with a great solution. But addressing that green belt with the amount of traffic and recreationalists that may be out there with even a drink in their hand, kids, paddle boards, and then you have those that are looking for low stress commuting. That's something that I would try to encourage you to look at in this design, especially with that piece that the hotel's hoping to reserve.
Understood. So just to clarify on this one particularly, that the client only owns a portion of the greenbelt. The majority of the greenbelt actually resides on the city of Boise's parcel. That's between this parcel and then city of Boise and then the Boise River itself. So this client doesn't actually own the entire greenbelt.
Understood, but in trying to route, the conflict is with the recreationalists really interacting with the hotel. And then those that are looking for low stress commuting on the greenbelt. And so it's how do you separate those, and can those that are looking to commute, it would need to be a public-private partnership, but could they get to Garden Street somehow?
Understood. Okay.
So Jenna, is there any discussion about getting rid of Garden Street?
Well, we haven't gone that far with anyone, not with ACHD and not with the hotel. I would think that the majority of the users would be the hotel. And I do certainly think that might be a discussion point if they wanted to vacate a way to reutilize that as a realign and reuse as a public amenity. Of course, the only conversation that I've had with the hotel was very brief, and it was recognizing that that they have their own expenditures. They're not a public entity, but how can we address the situation?
I would like to identify one path that currently could solve that route. Is that if you're on the greenbelt and you come under the underpass, you could actually take, sorry, just this way. You could actually take the up ramp onto Main Street and then hit the bikeway that is actually on Main Street and then enter onto Garden Street and bypass that section altogether, which would put you out in the shade. So there are options, but we can definitely explore that further.
I think that would be great. I think the one is if you're going the opposite way, how do you make that turn? That might be a great suggestion. Thank you.
And I guess in looking at this, there was mentioned, Jenna, the right in, right out of the kind of grayed out parking area to the east. That would be right in, right out by nature of the one way, correct? And then I guess my overarching question is, are we looking at this application as if that eastern parking is not part of this plan.
To clarify, you're talking about the right and right out on Main Street into the parking lot of the unimproved access via ACHD. Currently.
Correct.
ACHD
Right where your cursor is, right? That's a right in, right out only because it's a one-way going into that parking lot.
Correct, yes. And ACHD, given the preliminary comments, did not indicate anything on that.
Okay. But I guess, are we looking at this application as far as parking and landscaping to include or to not include that area to the east? And I guess it's kind of developed as is, so it may be a moot point.
Yes, we're submitting it as a separate parcel, and we're not approving that parcel over 25%.
Okay, yep, that answers my question. And then skylights, new, replaced, or as is?
We will be doing. I don't have a good example of that here. This might be the best way to see it. So there are currently skylights that go over this front facade over towards the river. There's a V shape, and then they go around the back. And so what we are doing is we are replacing the skylights on the front here. So this front face of this pyramid form, the new skylights, this riverside facing face would have new skylights, and then the back side, which is facing the Riverside Hotel, we were going to close those skylights off for a couple of reasons. Those skylights were originally utilized, as we understand, to provide daylight for a seating mezzanine that used to exist for the original establishment, the chart house. They had a seating dining loft elevated. That space is now used and will be continued to be used as mechanical equipment mezzanine. And so it doesn't require any of the skylights, and the skylights are such poor performing that they are increasing the heat load of the building. So it benefits the energy use of the building to eliminate the skylights that are on that facade facing the direct sun. So we'll be doing roofing over that would match the existing roofing to the best we can.
But the 70s bubbles go away.
I wish, but I think we're gonna replace them with new versions of the prismatic domes.
Oh, so they're new, but they're still domes.
Yes.
Got it. And then the other another thought I had when you're talking about that bridge, and that's a fine slide to leave up there, is, you know, we're probably going to want to see, we are going to want to see what happens at the exit of that bridge across the Riverside parking lot. So, you know, make sure we have pedestrian, you know, safety measures and marking, and, you know, whatever the surface material is of that, let's call it sidewalk that goes from where your cursor is to the hotel. So we're not just dumping people into the parking lot.
Completely understood. The plans right now are to include an axial pathway that connects to the main entrance of the hotel in the distance. So there'd be treatment of the asphalt surface for indoor pavers.
So just a comment on that, I'm not, opposed to you putting a bridge and enhancing that connection to Riverside. I wish there was a way to enhance the connection to Riverside along Garden Street, or whatever Garden Street might become. One of the issues with this building is that it is so far back. So I see that's why you're like, hey, well, maybe we can get this bridge, enhance that connection. But one of the things that we're going to look at is how are you relating more towards the street, which Garden Street being the one, I mean, as of today. And, you know, if there was a way to, I don't know, move that bridge or not even have the bridge or something where you're actually bringing people more towards the street and then using the public realm to get over to Riverside and enhance, you know, of course, Riverside would have to do the enhancements on their side, but, you know, I'm not saying don't do the bridge. I'm just saying one of the things that we'll look at is how you are with the building as far back as it is, bringing it closer to the street with various techniques such as, you know, enhanced pedestrian walkway, lighting, whatever it may be. That's that bridge right there is just very far from the street, although it is a perfect connection to the convention center. So I can see why you would want that. Just don't ignore the street.
Completely understood. And I acknowledge what you are mentioning about connection of the Riverside Hotel to the street. I think what I'm understanding is that if there was a connection of this pathway system over to Garden Street, perhaps on this other parcel. Over, I don't know if you can see my cursor.
No, I'm saying on your parcel. I'm not putting something on Riverside. I'm saying right now your building is so far from the street. What are you going to do to enhance the connection of your building to the street? And I suggested considering that maybe that bridge, not opposed to it, but maybe either instead of or in addition to better connection right where your cursor is. Oh no, is that my cursor? That's my cursor. A little bit south there, right there, just a better connection through there from your building to the sidewalk. Yeah, from your building to the sidewalk. Is that a sidewalk right there? So you have this. It looks like you have a sidewalk. What does that look like?
Correct. So we are proposing a sidewalk along the slough and along the parking lot. That will be a compliant route from the right of way to the building itself, to the 500-foot minimum requirement plaza that's in front of the structure. Also leading to the green belt and then leading to the cut through to Riverside Hotel. That is part of a different project. So we are proposing a compliant route and bringing people off the right of way that currently doesn't exist. We're still trying to emphasize the existing building in the 8,000-foot mountain range behind it, and not really trying to draw attention to the parking lot in front.
And was there thought given that connection, you know, in the initial studies of it, that connection draw people to the main entrance of the hotel, or is it wanting to just go straight direct across? Because I think maybe what Maureen was getting to is if that bridge comes forward, then maybe you're connecting to this spot where your double arrows are down the page from where you are. There's a couple double arrows, and that's just a kind of a large landscaping area. That if the bridge was going to that landscaping area, then maybe they're getting closer to the main entrance of the hotel.
So yeah, there's two parts to that. So that is a main thoroughfare exit out of the Riverside Hotel itself and Convention Center. Those are the main doors that go in the Convention Center.
Yep.
And it also does another part is that there's a clean route that we can make a compliant route with protected islands on that parcel in the future for that future project. To kind of clean that whole thing up. If we bring it the other way, we are starting to get into a bunch of City of Boise's sewer pressure lines that are sitting up on that bridge. They actually just did a big rework on this last spring. So we're trying to stay out of all that and all the easements that kind of reside underneath that bridge as those utilities are strung across that river.
Yeah, I guess I would say that routes, the pedestrian connectivity that you have outlined right there, just that the importance of each one of those is, I guess I wouldn't say that the connection over the hotel should be this main connection, and then we've just got this secondary access down to Garden Street. I think the importance of both of those connections need to be the same. It needs to feel like, this main connection down to Garden Street is really how we are connecting this building to the street frontage. And so that pedestrian spine right there, in my mind, because we're so far set back and tucked back in there, that's going to be very important treatment and not necessarily just a sidewalk along the parking.
Yeah, not just an ADA compliant, but an actual.
No, I'd
entry.
like to see some landscaping there and just really feel like you're coming off the street and you get a sense of arrival as you're moving down that spine to get to the entrance.
So, and yeah, we can definitely see what we can do to enhance and kind of re-emphasize that route with limitations that we can't get into the 6500 CFS line that is kind of prohibiting us to moving into the west of this.
Sure.
We can definitely look at enhancing that further.
And just to, this is pre-application, I believe. I like the fact that the sidewalk is on the western side of the parking. Obviously you don't want your pedestrians being backed into. However, where your entryway is, it would just, like if you were to take that purple arrow that you just drew and just go directly, it goes right through some of your parking and your landscaping and the driveway. So, that's not possible. I get it. But I wish that the sidewalk, the entry to your entrance was a little bit better connected so that when someone turns into the entrance, they're actually seeing the entrance. I'm not sure how to accomplish that, but I think you probably have it in the best spot. I just wish that there was a way to just tie in your entrance a little bit more to the street. And there's some mature landscaping, so you don't get rid of that. And yeah.
And here's another arrow to shoot at it, just because I think it's interesting, and give it 10 minutes of thought back at the drafting table. But imagine I'm coming from the main entrance of the hotel, and then I'm walking down the Garden Street sidewalk, right? Not across there, but from the main entrance, I go out on the Garden Street, and then I'm doing the long sweeping turn, stop right there, and then add a connection along the flagpoles through what is this, just a big green lawn. Because what I see you're beginning to develop the bridge as this kind of architectural interesting element that may be like a draw and a focal point. So if I'm coming along Garden Street, maybe instead of going along down to this straight ADA sidewalk, I can meander through on the riverside side of the Settlers Canal to the focal point of the bridge and then cross the bridge down there. That's just it just came to me as like a interesting procession and pathway from the main entrance of the hotel that I would kind of veer off by those flagpoles and meander through the lawn and then hit the bridge, cross the bridge and go into the Crab Shack instead of going along the, kind of guardian guardrail and then miss the little sidewalk connection that you have proposed here now. Did that make sense? Yeah, I'm on the west side. Those two squares are flagpoles, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so just come into the right side of the flagpoles down to the bridge and then cross the bridge.
Yeah, we can definitely mirror something on the east
Just-
side or
just
west
to-
side of that slope.
Yeah, just to explore that, because it just seems like a big, it's a neat opportunity, I think, for a kind of a landscaped procession to get to the focal point of the bridge. And maybe an unused, I guess
This
is
is-
probably where it.
Yeah, this is Josh Herschel with Cushing Terrell as well, 800 West Main. One thing to note on the pedestrian bridge connecting Riverside to this space, it has to be there because they're using it for continuation of the liquor license. So we can't really move that pedestrian bridge too far down because that's the way Garden City Code is wrote, because they're connected by one piece. So it's just something to think about, but we can look at meandering sidewalks on the west side of the slough and see what we can do there. The other thing is tough is back in the day, this building was a pretty big iconic architecture element to the community. And so we're trying to pay homage to it and not tear it down. And so that's the hard part where, yes, we would love it to orient it towards the street, put it towards the green belt, but we're just trying to maintain an existing piece of architecture within Garden City. And so that is hard trying to address Garden Street as well.
I'm not sure you have to make changes to the building itself to address Garden Street. I think there's a variety of things that you can do.
So Derek, I'm trying to comprehend what you were thinking there. Guide me when I draw a line here, if you don't mind. So you're talking about from this
Yep.
sidewalk
Yep, now up. Nope,
up
go
here.
up. Yep, to your
Gotcha.
bridge. Because that's just a big grassy kind of unlandscaped area. It's just all grass.
Yeah,
It
we
maybe
can
makes
certainly look at it.
maybe it makes a more interesting approach if you're coming from the lobby of the hotel.
Yeah, we'll certainly look at that and see what we can accommodate there. It's hard to tell on this drawing because we don't have that illustrated very well on that side of the property line, but makes a lot of sense.
To further Derek's point there, I think it's an interesting idea because it assists in the placemaking and just giving one other thing to do and another place to be.
And you wouldn't run into the guys taking the trash across the street either.
So, yeah, we can incorporate that into the next package that's submitted for that project.
Just explore it. It's wasn't a requirement, just a exploration, I guess.
Any other comments or guidance? Or questions of the committee?
I want to add on to what I had said earlier. You don't have to change the building necessarily to bring it closer to the street. There's, I think once you look into building that sidewalk, you'll find that you may have to get rid of that parking, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots. Having a large plaza going in to your main entrance in place of all of that parking could be an option that could enhance the connection from the street to the building, as well as lighting and signage. So
Completely understood, and I had not elaborated on what improvements we are doing, what we consider to be a plaza. This area right here with this, it's gonna have a bonsai ornamental evergreen located right here. And then we're gonna have crisscross tiki torches that will draw your attention to the establishment. There will be one here, and then there will be a few others that are located along here to illuminate the pathways. And then the bridge, which is that other project, also has incorporated lighting into it. So that it will be illuminated with its own lighting scheme to light that pathway. And then as part of this batch of work for this particular establishment, the parking lot lighting will be brought up to code with the electrical site plan. You can see that there's new lighting for the parking lot area. So to draw your attention and draw your eye, there will be some fire feature tiki torches that are located at the entry point, further enhancing sort of that the idea of approaching the building from the pedestrian standpoint and leading you towards the building, and also leading you towards the entry with the fire features.
May want to consider extending those features closer to the street, because it's a great connection to the parking lot. I'm not sure how connected it will be to the street.
Understood.
Go ahead. And I'll just say too, like architecturally, the, you know, kind of bringing back the original concept is, you know, that's pretty exciting, and you've definitely done a good job with that and screening all those elements that have just been eyesores on top of the building. It's going to be vastly improved. So architecturally and conceptually, some of the things that you're doing are pretty exciting, and I think are going to really dress up this corner of Garden City.
And speaking of connectivity, this is Hannah. Just as a staff comment, there is not an existing sidewalk along, I'll call it the south side of Garden Street. And typically, like in Garden City Code, a detached sidewalk would be required along this property. However, as I mentioned in the staff report, if there is a detached sidewalk proposed, it would eliminate the existing mature trees on that southern property, so the 2289 property, and it would also run straight into the slough without any kind of sidewalk possibility there, unless they redid the bridge or connected it like they've shown on their proposed plans. And then additionally, if the sidewalk were built over to West Main Street, it would essentially dead end, as that is the entrance to the highway connector region. And there isn't a crosswalk along the Garden Lane and West Main Street intersection at this point in time. And so just as far as connectivity goes, Garden City Code does require detached sidewalk, but there are a few items to be hashed out as far as requiring that sidewalk, or maybe just requiring a sidewalk from inside that parking lot area of 2289 to the other parcel across the street.
So question, does this submittal, when it comes in, does it have to include the section that's on the south side of Garden Street? Or is it only including it now because the dumpster is going over there? Is that a separate parcel? Does it have to be part of it?
It is a separate parcel currently, as it is separated by SHD's roadway, the right of way for North Garden Street, as it's shown in the plan right now. We are showing the crosswalk for the compliant for the pedestrians that move safely across Garden Street into the facility, as that the parcel is also owned by the same owner, and they're trying to use a shared parking agreement between those two parcels, even though it's the same ownership.
So just for consideration, Hannah just pointed out the requirement for a detached parking sidewalk on the south side of Garden Street. If in the shared parking aside, the crosswalk aside, I expect to see those. But if it's not included as part of this application, which I think would mean that you couldn't put the, well, maybe you could put the dumpster there. There could be a shared agreement for that, although that would be an accessory use. And if you don't have another use, I don't know, you'd have to talk to staff. But there might be a way that you can avoid triggering the requirement for a detached sidewalk on that parcel if it's not part of your application package. Just something to consider.
Yeah, and to staff's point, we do agree that a sidewalk down there really doesn't gain as much as that would require the ACHD's bridge to be reconstructed to aid in the east-west movement on the south side of North Garden Street. Additionally, that we'll be dealing with ITDs on ramp for 184. Understood.
And maybe there's an opportunity that let's call it detached, maybe that is internal to the site, right? There's some mature trees that are along there, but maybe there's a, internal pathway, let's call it, rather than a detached sidewalk. So that if I'm parking closest to Main Street, then I can kind of go get on this internal pathway to get to the crosswalk, and I'm not tempted just to frogger across Garden Street on the easternmost curb cut.
Understood. I think that if any internal or any detached sidewalk were required, it may present that parking lot non-usable because it becomes so tight of turning radiuses that you cannot achieve it, especially if trash has to go in there and still hit the 40-foot radiuses required by public services.
I think Hannah's point is that it is required.
Correct.
Hannah, am I incorrect there?
Yeah, so it is required as of this point in time, unless the applicant were to submit a sidewalk waiver and they do qualify, or if they do qualify for that sidewalk waiver. I haven't analyzed it as it hasn't been submitted.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, unless anybody stops me, I think we'll move on to the discussion portion of the agenda with minor plan unit development fiscal year 2019 #1, requesting some material amendments. You're good. You're good. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And we do have the applicant as being Derek Kerner, but I'm not seeing him. Is there somebody here for this item?
Yeah, this is Zeb Leach, acting on behalf of the property owners residing at 1117 East Plaza Drive, Suite F. How's it going?
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you'd like to present the changes, your
Yeah,
most
definitely.
recent.
Yeah, so last time we stood in front of the commission, we had existing materials that were a little bit different than what was proposed originally. We went back to the board, and what we did is, let's see, we added some stone wainscoting on the bottom half of the portion, and then put up some glazing inside of those garages. Those were both requests that you guys had asked for, and I think this will get it through. If there's anything that you guys notice on this that you'd like a little changed, or you're not happy with, we're willing to do that too. Also, in these plans that were submitted, you'll also see the statue of Idaho public art. I'm not sure exactly what you want to call it. Located public art. I know it's been a discussion item in the past. And that's really all I have. I mean, there's those two changes that we made, stone wainscoting, and then the glazing in the garage doors.
All right, thank you. Staff, do you have anything? Staff has nothing to add to that.
I remember we had some discussion about the upper gables and how there was like a lot of things going on in the original application, and now there's just cedar siding or pine TNG, not TNG, V groove siding.
Yeah, so we have two different types of siding on the gables. There's the front little pop-out gables that are directly above the door. Those are the cedar tongue and groove, and then on the gable directly behind that, we have a board and batt.
I think, yeah, we did have some discussion, I mean, about making sure we added back in some of that detail, the gable vents and corbelline, some all the details gone from those elements. And I think that in looking what the resubmittal is, I guess we now have some, did we have those like little shade structures before? It doesn't appear that we had those little, well, maybe. No.
The only difference I'm seeing is the stone wainscot, the windows in the garage doors, which I'm a fan of. That's it. Those were the only two changes. It seems like it. Am I wrong that's it? Those are the only two changes from what you brought last time?
That is the only two changes that we've made. That is correct.
So nothing changed above the eaves.
The eaves,
Yeah, I mean, all those gables that we talked about quite a bit, nothing changed up there.
no, no.
You know, I'll be honest. Hold on. I feel like that stone wainscoting on the along the bottom. I feel like it makes it look longer, which we were trying to break it up more. I feel like that just, I don't know.
I mean, I think one of the other options that we looked into is maybe running that stone all the way up on the side. That kind of closely resembles what was originally submitted the first time. So on either side of where the door opening is, running them all the way up to the top of the gable, that was an option, but it felt a little busy in my architect's point of view. I'm not sure your guys' thoughts on that.
Did you consider running it? And I'm not saying this would make it better. I'm just thinking, like adding stone where the garage is. Of course, that would make the garage stand out more, which you don't want. Never mind. I take that back. What if you added?
Go ahead.
Sorry. What if the stone was along that section of the homes where the window is, instead of just being on the bottom? Hold on. Brett, Derek. Am I wrong in thinking that that stone wainscoting along the bottom makes it look longer? Am I just seeing that incorrect?
Yeah, I don't know or recall a discussion that we had that talked about like breaking that part up. I remember the garage doors and the glazing, and that's there and that's great. But then I remember a discussion about above where we had a lot of detail in the gables. In the original approved application, there was 4 things going on, and then it all just became monochromatic. And so that's what I'm looking for, and I don't see it in this. I'm not hung up about the wainscoting. I think that's often a, like, let's add detail, let's add stone, lick and stick brick, and it'll make it better, and it sometimes doesn't. So I'm looking for detail up in the gables, not necessarily
Something more expressive. Yeah, something more expressive at the entry and the front approach to the home.
I mean, if
I was just going to say, it's always concerning for me to have this, the stone wainscot was in there in the beginning. It was in the approved set of drawings. So that's not necessarily something that was added. Maybe it's added back to your drawings now, but turning the corner and, extending the wainscot back 4 feet and stopping it. I guess I would like to, if you're going to utilize wainscot or some stone elements, we didn't have those conditions on the previous application where we came back and wrapped the corner by 4 feet and stopped the stone.
where are we looking at?
Look at basically your end elevations.
Uh-huh.
If there's an opportunity to stop that wainscot stone in a inside corner, that would be preferable.
Yeah, we're open to running that all the way through.
Doesn't have a tacked on look.
Yeah, we're open to running that all the way through. It was my understanding that in our last discussion and application, the main concern of this property was the front facing and the parking lot, which would be the north and east elevations.
Yeah, that still is what we touched on the last time. It's just that we're not seeing any additional detailing elements on those front entries come back in this latest round.
Well, we have some that we have the wainscoting, so I guess that would be the only added element as far as where those entryways are. As far as materials go, the original application, I believe we had 3 different materials ending up on those gables. Let me just see. If I remember correctly.
I don't think the wainscoting actually adds to the entryway.
No, it doesn't.
I think it actually detracts from it. It focuses attention elsewhere. And to me, makes the building look way longer, which is not.
Yeah, the original application has, in the gables, it has stone, it has kickers, it has the louvered vents, and it has this siding material. And now in the tallest gables, we just have siding material.
I have not seen any of those vents or on these original plans, and maybe I'm just
Let me see here.
Yeah, A 2.11.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
In the tall, skinny gables.
A 2.11. Oh, interesting.
It was.
Yeah. It really kind of helped with getting a little bit more detail and expression on that front entrance, because it's garage dominated entryway, right?
Right.
And really that's what we're trying to combat with getting some glass in the garage doors, adding a little bit more detail to those entry components
Yeah,
Well,
and
what-
again, go ahead, Zip.
What if we put in some of those vents? Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3.
I mean, I'd say if you added those back into the upper gables,
Yeah. Like 1, 2. I think as that original plan sat, that helped a lot. Just with the wainscoting, it kind of just your eyes get brought to the bottom of the fourplex, and then as you move up, it's just kind of like you guys mentioned, slightly dull.
And I think too, like the original ones had kickers at the bottom of the gable and then a little kicker in the ridge. And now that the roof is kind of morphed into more of a Dutch hip there with I can't remember what that gable return is called, that eave return. Now a kicker there at the bottom would be a little weird because you have that eave return, but have the architect look at putting the louvers back in and seeing what it looks like with with a kicker or a faux ridge up in there for another element. Because I don't think it's not possible anymore, the way that roof was actually built with the eave return, to put a kicker where the eave return is.
No, I mean, you could, I don't think it would make much sense, and I think it would look a little strange.
Yeah. But to reiterate what was said in the last meeting too, is like, this did get more contemporary, and it's just a matter of making it more contemporary and equally as interesting and detailed as it was. So, I like some of the contrast in materials here that we have with the stark white and the warm wood. I think that's working well. It's just a matter of getting in some of those detail elements that we had.
Is there a way to, and I don't know if the applicant is willing, but is there a way to identify what kind of elements would be desirable and make a motion to approve and send it to staff so they don't have to come back again? I don't know if, is this something we need to see again, or is this, can we provide enough?
I mean, I think if we can get those detail elements that we just talked about incorporated back into here, that it's probably something that staff can review to see that it's done and it doesn't need to come back. I think that those are the missing pieces, the missing components.
And how do you feel about the wainscoting versus non-wainscoting?
If you add the other elements, maybe the wainscoting won't look as prominent.
Yeah,
I don't like
wainscoting, the 4-foot high wainscot on the bottom of the, that's, I think that's just kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of tired.
I think it detracts from the
and for the cost,
contemporary.
for the cost of the stone, when it's going more contemporary like this, I'd say you could get rid of that and you can add these other detail elements in there, and now you've got something that has more of a contemporary flavor, and it's not pushing and pulling for, well, okay, am I 70s or am I contemporary? What am I doing here?
Agreed. Well said.
So does that give enough for the applicant that you think you can take that back and get some of those detail elements incorporated back in, and then off to staff and on with your project?
Yes, I believe so. I'd just like to be clear on a couple things. So we talked about the gable vents, right? Adding those back in. What else would you like to see on the front in those? Obviously the glazing on the garage doors, but as far as something to break up that the entryways, I think we were having some trouble as far as what exactly material would look like.
Oh, I thought we were kind of going in a different direction, just adding in those different elements in the gable area, not necessarily different material.
No, that was just it. Taking
Yeah.
the design that it was previously approved with those kind of the heavy timber kickers and the gable vent and bringing those back in where it makes sense on those elevations to add that extra level of detail.
Gotcha.
And I mean, the entry itself, that gabled entry over the door, that piece, I guess I can see that as this more contemporary element with the different type of siding material and such. So it can kind of stand alone. I'm not thinking that has to be necessarily dressed up. It's a different element than it was before.
Yeah. And then in addition, keep the glazing on your garage doors. Consider getting rid of the stone wainscoting. Add those elements to the gables.
Yep. Louvers and kickers.
Yep.
And I guess we should ask Jenah and Hannah, are you guys comfortable reviewing that?
We just had a sidebar and we think we're understanding the kickers and the gable vents and keeping the glazing. And so as long as there's equal interest as the original approval. Is that, we're hearing it right? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. We think we can do that.
All right, I would make a motion that we approve this subject to staff reviewing revised drawings that address the gable and the glazing on the garage, and it's up to the applicant to determine whether the wainscoting is added. I suggest not.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Everyone in favor, I guess.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Zeb.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And one last formal discussion item on the agenda. Up next is a subdivision site modification related to landscaping plans. We have that it is been simple, but you don't appear to be been simple.
I'm not. So my name is Leslie Prendeville, I'm with Rodney and Partners, speaking on behalf of Ben Semple. Address is 1450 West Bannock, 702. So the modifications that we are requesting are all related to landscape on the site. I just want to preface that by saying that there are no changes to the design of the buildings or to the site layout. And our responses in question of items 8, 10, 11, 12, and 13, which I'll go through those to kind of give a little more detail as to what we've revised since the approved plans and what we are proposing now. So item 8 was in response to the request for trees along, I believe it was 45th Street. There was a request that we propose trees within the frontage on the northern portion of that landscape strip. Due to ACHD's requirements of maintaining a 10-foot separation from any of their facilities, including catch basins, we can't propose anything in that area. However, we did propose shifting one of the boulevard lindens to the adjacent planter bed that is just beyond the parking stalls. You'll see that in revision cloud addendum 6. It's labeled as 1 TB. That suffices for that item. And with the 2 trees that are also located along East 45th Street, the 3 trees total do qualify for the street tree requirement by city code. And then for items 10 and 11, In order to meet the required tree mitigation, we have upsized all proposed trees to 2.5 caliber inches. This creates a total of 85 caliber inches. The required mitigation was for 83. Item 12 was just a resubmittal of the form to show that we were coming to the design review discussion. And then item 13 is a little more detailed, and this is in relation to the northwest property line. There, on record, there should be some sort of video that is depicting the need for the proposed wall. I believe Wendy, the civil engineer on the project, had handled that. The request was that no wall or fencing was to be 6 feet or taller. We have actually relocated the fencing just beyond the wall so that there's going to be a visual separation between the two. It's essentially going to create a terraced look, and then between those two, the 4-foot tall open vision fencing and the wall will be landscape material to also provide screening and buffering there. And that is evident with a variety of shrubs, perennials, ornamental grasses. I don't believe that the original plant count should have changed. There have been no new materials added, just been kind of maneuvering some of the originally proposed items. And that area has also been proposed with, I believe there's a gate on the residence side as well as the drive aisle side that will be controlled with a Knox box to provide accessibility for emergency services. And then the maintenance of the wall, the fencing, and the landscape material will be a responsibility of the HOA. And then we'd also provided some information regarding the discrepancy between the originally approved landscape plan and the one that is currently being proposed. Due to some restrictions from ITD, ACHD, and Third Cities Code, some trees are not able to be located where they were originally proposed, and that was due to the gravity irrigation line that does run along that wall on the northwest property line. In order to limit the disturbance of that area, we've had to relocate trees. They are not class 2, most of them are class 1s. However, we have provided calculations that indicate the reduction of those class 2s and the increase of the class 1 trees on site. So with the revisions, we're showing a 60% reduction in the class 2 trees. However, we're providing a 131% increase on class 1s, and then a 125% increase on shrubs, perennials, and ornamental grasses. So although they were reduced on site, the limitations were due to the irrigation district's requirements, ACHD policy, and the proximity to any of the retaining walls and the fence fittings that were proposed. With that being said, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Leslie? I have one on the step back on the wall. How far setback is the fence?
I believe that he had a few feet of distance. I don't have a scale on here, but it is large enough to fit an ornamental grass, which typically these are about 3 feet wide. So I believe there's a 3 foot wide separation between the face of the wall and the fencing location.
And what would the total height be altogether?
Cumulative, I don't have the wall height, but I do know that the fence will be 4 feet in height. I don't happen to have any of Wendy's materials on hand.
I can answer that
Okay.
too. The retaining wall is going to be about 5 feet 6 inches from the existing grade, which is the pit, which is shown in that video. That was a late submittal today. So altogether it'd be 5 feet 6 inches plus about 4 feet,
4 feet
of
the
fence
open vision fencing
on top.
Thank you. And then that's a good question. Do you have a staff report to add?
I don't have a super in-depth staff report as the applicant did that deep dive for me. I just wanted to say that the reason why this application is coming back to the design review committee is because while staff is able to approve of minor changes or substitutions of class 2, 3, and 1 trees during the construction plan phase. This proposal, as noted by the applicant, has had to reduce the quantity of class 2 trees, including their 2 class 2 linden trees along 45th Street. So while it does technically meet code standards, except for the street tree portion on 45th Street, the approved version of the subdivision is different enough than what was going through the construction plan approval to require essentially an approval of these site modifications without having to go through the entire public hearing process again.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal?
I have well, 2 questions, but it's for everyone. So the only code non-compliance are the required street trees. Along which street was that, Hannah?
It's 45th Street.
45th Street. Okay, and then my second question is, and I did try to go back through all of the notes in the previous meetings. Do you recall, or does anyone recall, when we were going through and looking at this and reviewing it, if there were any reasons that we asked for certain landscaping in order to mitigate impacts from other areas? And if so, does this new plan conflict with that? I didn't see any, but I'm wondering if someone else remembers something.
I'm just flipping back and forth from original and modifications, and there was a large tree at the terminus view, and now there's not. So that may have been that may be impactful, kind of at the end of the drive.
Yeah.
Which bears the question, what is there, and is it working for a end of drive terminus view, or do we want that tree back?
So for the applicant, how are you mitigating the fact that you're not complying with the street trees that are required along 45th? And what happened to why were the plans changed at the end of the drive?
So the end of the drive is related to item 8, which was in reference to one of the ACHD existing catch basins. And based on how that lays out, the 10-foot offset for that is at the back of the sidewalk, I believe. So although we cannot fit it within that small turf area that is indicated, we have shifted that to the back side of the sidewalk so that it is somewhat located there, but without impacting ACHD's policy regarding their facilities.
I'm looking at item number 8, and it's related to 45th Street, not the terminus view. And hold on, let me double check something. Yeah, so.
Oh, are you referring to the end of the drive aisle on the west side?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the reason for that is that we have a gravity irrigation line that services the pressurized irrigation that was designed by the civil engineer, and it happens to run right down the center of that planter bed between the face of the wall and the building facade. So in order to limit the impact there, we can't really place any trees on top of that, otherwise it would impact the irrigation supply. And I would like to speak more to that, but seeing that I'm not the civil engineer, I can't necessarily speak to the impact that it would have, other than the roots would impose on that irrigation line. So I would have to defer that to Wendy.
And what did you replace it with? I'm looking at this and I'm trying to find 8, 9, what the heck that is.
So we did relocate trees along the eastern property line that wraps around that corner lot to help accommodate for that. I think that's going to be pretty similar to what we had seen when we initially approved plans. So we've kind of tried to relocate those to another portion of the site if possible to kind of accommodate that so that the site is still going to have at least close to the required number of trees that's feasible within the site, because this is a fairly small site. We're trying to accommodate that and make it work well with the limited available space.
Just a side note, it's not the size of the lot, it's how much you're putting on the lot. What did you, so you had a tree there, you're not putting it there because of the irrigation. What are you putting there? What landscaping?
We have a variety of plant material that's indicated in the plant schedule. It's a combination of evergreen, shrubs, ornamental grasses, and perennials. I believe that specific area is larger shrub material indicated by. Actually, looking at this, it does look like it's a smaller juniper in that area. But I think that we could provide something there that would be a better blockade essentially for that area. But we need to make sure that we can find something that has a much shallower root depth so that we don't impact that line.
I apologize, you may have addressed this, but how are you proposing to mitigate the fact that you're not doing the street trees?
Because we're providing trees, other trees on site to accommodate.
Which is great for the number of trees, but what are you doing as far as, you know, a street tree provides an environment on the street. So is there anything that you guys are doing? I don't know what might be possible. Awnings, lighting, benches.
As far as I'm aware, we have not proposed anything like that. I might need to let Tyson, the owner, speak to that at some point if he's willing to. But I'm unaware of any additional amenities.
Question for staff, if they're not meeting the requirement for the street trees, can it even be approved? Or is it within the purview of the design review committee to see how they can mitigate because of the requirements by ACHD?
Well, before we can't not approve the application. The application has a condition in it to require that all utilities, overhead utilities, be undergrounded. And right now, it's staff's understanding that the overhead utilities located at 45th Street could be put underground. And that is the reason why the class 2 proposed street tree has decreased to class 1, is because of those overhead utilities. So if those overhead utilities are put underground, they could put in that original class 2 or 3 street tree, but we haven't had contact with the overhead utilities owner, and there hasn't been a letter submitted by the applicant as far as the utilities stating that they are not allowed to underground those utilities. But as far if they are not allowed to underground those utilities, generally staff tries to work out a solution, and that might require a redesign of the subdivision.
Is there often instances where utilities are not allowed to go underground?
is not my experience that the utility, of course, there's a cost associated with undergrounding the utilities, but it's my experience that typically utilities will allow for undergrounding to occur. Understandably, in infill and redevelopment, that it can be difficult to do that because of the cost that's associated with a small portion of the frontage that would experience that undergrounding of utilities.
But that does solve the street tree issue because then they can be 2 or 3, class 2 or 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the condition that was placed on that was through the design review process.
The utilities condition went through design review, planning and zoning, and city council, as this was a subdivision.
So can we just recommend that this come back if they're not able to get the underground utilities, and that as far as the, I mean, that's the true deficiency, right? And what am I missing?
I'm not sure that you're missing anything. The one thing that I might suggest is that the sidewalk policy that we work with indicates if it's infeasible to relocate a utility, that you can detach a sidewalk by a minimum of 2 feet, and you can push the trees back behind the sidewalk. So the sidewalk policy does address situations that may come up, but typically in a subdivision, the code has that new development shall underground the utilities, and that has been, there's precedent to address that within the right of way. So I don't think you're missing anything there.
So I'm not sure we should take any action until we know what's going to happen with the underground utilities.
Or can we say this is approved with the conditions, and one of the conditions is that it's underground? Condition that it's
Well,
underground is in there, and then make the street trees class 2 or 3.
Well, that's already a requirement.
The one thing that I might suggest is the guidance on the other portion, if you're okay with the overall 9.5 feet, if there's a setback of 3 feet between the fence and the retaining wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other would be if you're okay, or if you would require that the terminus view be addressed with understanding that it might be a shallow route, but taller landscaping.
It doesn't even have to be addressed necessarily with landscaping.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't know what Derek and.
Yeah, I mean, it could be some type of a art element or structure of some sort, you know, just to be something there to create interest at the terminus of that drive.
Right. Or a pressurized irrigation line, which isn't that hard to make corners in, could have corners in it around a tree well, and that tree could go there.
Do you need a formal motion on this, Jenna, or is this?
As long as we're all in agreement, because this is a discussion, I don't know that we need a formal discussion. So what we're hearing is no allowance without additional information from the utilities on the street trees. Terminus view must be addressed, and the retaining wall is okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we do have one other discussion item that I think we can discuss that's not formally under discussion items. And with that, I might turn it over to you, Maureen.
Oh. Yes, guys, I had to resign with the Garden City Design Review Committee. My last meeting will be June 6th. I just, additional work responsibilities, and Jenna, by the way, no, I did not go to ITD. I stayed with FHWA, just got a promotion basically. And it's just too much. I'm not able to handle. I'm balancing meetings on Mondays like crazy. So, which is why I have to miss next meeting. But I do want to say I have thoroughly enjoyed being on this committee with all of you, staff included. I mean, it's just been a really good experience. I have learned an incredible amount from you guys, and I'll miss it. And I wish you luck.
Oh, you will be missed. That's it's sad news, but totally understandable.
I so wanted to do this while Jeff Hatch was here so he could dance.
Yes, you will be missed, Maureen, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Your voice and your wisdom and opinions are always certainly welcome. So, and good luck in new adventures.
Yeah. Well, good luck with you guys, and of course, I'll see you June 6th. And but good luck with the live, work, create, and everything else that comes up. And remember, every time a PUD comes in, why should they get a variance?
And maybe you want to just like step off the committee, but be on the live, work, create task force.
If there's any other time, I did put in my letter to my email to Hanna and Jenah, said, please keep me in mind for future, small work group type things, not realizing this is coming up. And honestly, I think in another 6 or 7 months, I will have more time, but not immediately. And I do want to be engaged in future endeavors. Please keep me in mind.
Maureen, I wanted to chime in on thanking you for all of your dedication over the years that you've been doing this, and you will be missed. And I also concur. I mean, the amount that I learned from this committee and from you is really invaluable. Not only what you all do for the city, but also the training that you end up giving the staff as well is pretty significant. So thank you.
Yeah, especially for Derek and Brett on not just the architectural side of things, but your willingness to work with applicants and really trying to see their point of view. I've learned from you guys to try and be better at that, as well as, hey, no, this is my opinion. I'm going to stick with it, and I'm going to keep diving into the subject. I learned both of those things in addition to all the architectural. I learned both of those items from you, and I thank you. All right, that's it. I'm going to get emotional.
I just wonder, I think we're going to have to, it's going to be a big one to replace, but I think we're going to need some help.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to open it up on the website until the committee knew, but we'll be opening it up tomorrow, or actually Wednesday, likely on the website, and announcing the position. If you know of anybody, I think Maureen certainly brings knowledge related to the a lot of things that she brings with her, but in particular, she really knows how to address the public realm and transportation. She lives and breathes every day. And then the other whole that we've talked about in the past is the landscape component. So if you happen to know of anybody that might wear either one of those shoes, please let me know and I can reach out to them directly.
Okay, will do.
Yep. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.